This is the final word. Commonwealth Games daily. Is it day 7? Is it the 7th day of competition?
I don't know.
Something like that. I think it is. There and thereabouts, because it was maybe last Friday and now it's a Saturday and we missed a couple of days. Anyway, it's whatever day it is.
7th day of cricket.
It's semi-final day.
Yeah.
More importantly, semi-final day, which means one day more. Geoff Lemon and Natalie Germanos with you. Show sponsored by Advanced Hair. Now, what do we have to do? I have to do the 30 seconds, don't I?
You have to do it.
Okay.
Yep.
2 games, 2 semi-finals. This isn't the 30 seconds, I'm just setting the scene. England playing India in the morning, Australia playing New Zealand in the evening. Okay. I can't remember who won the toss in the first game, but one of them did. India batted first. Smriti Mandhana went absolutely bananas. 61 at a strike rate of 200. India going at 10 and over. Then wickets fall. England claw them back. They get to 164, India. England start at 10 runs and over. And then wickets fall and India start to claw them back. And wickets fall in really funny and bizarre ways. They get really close at the end and they end up losing by 4 runs. And then New Zealand gets sent into bat against Australia. They make 144, which isn't enough. And the Australians, even though it takes until the 20th over and they lose a few wickets, run it down pretty comfortably nonetheless, even though it looked closer than it was. I reckon that's about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 35.
Yeah,
I think
maybe
that felt
35.
like a 35.
Was it 164 that India made, or was it 154?
164.
Was it 164?
Yeah, I'm positive.
All right.
I'm 100% sure.
Okay.
There were 2 6s on the scorecard. One of them was Mandhana, 61.
Is that how you remember things?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go with the 6s. No, numbers. Double numbers.
Double numbers, patterns. Trends. Human brain is a pattern recognition machine. That's what it's all about. It's all about, even that's why we see patterns in things that aren't actually there, where we're like,
now you sound like Beautiful Mind. This is starting to.
I had a peanut butter sandwich the day before I made 100, so now I have to have a peanut butter sandwich every time I go out to bat. That kind of thing. India, England, absolute belter.
Wow.
What a game. What a game.
I absolutely loved that game for lots of reasons, because it kind of had everything. As you spoke about Smriti Mandhana and that incredible innings. And actually the coach of England, Lisa Keightley, afterwards said she played an absolute blinder and maybe one of the best innings she's actually seen her play, in particular in a crunch game. She has been striking it well right through the tournament. She has been in form, so it's not like it was a surprise, but it was just the calmness that she went about it. And her partner at the other end, Shefali Verma, wasn't really doing a lot initially.
Yeah.
It wasn't really about her.
Wasn't required.
No, that's actually it, really. She wasn't required. But I don't think they bowled particularly well to her. Credit absolutely will go to Smriti Mandhana and how she played, but I don't think they bowled particularly well to her. I think they didn't test out the pitch for me enough. I was surprised when we didn't see the pace of Izzy Wong straight away to Shefali Verma, for example, because she doesn't like it short and she doesn't like it at her body. So I was expecting them to just go straight with that plan. They didn't do it, and I think it allowed them to settle in a little bit too much.
Yeah, they bowled Alice Capsey in the second over.
Yeah, so I was a bit surprised with some of the tactics from England. I thought they might go with the short stuff, and they barely actually even tried the shorter ball, which I was surprised, because we've actually seen through the tournament those balls can be quite effective. So I was a little bit surprised. But Mandhana, wow, it was great to watch.
We're used to her doing gorgeous stuff off the top of an innings, right? Like that's familiar. We know that happens. And I've seen her play like this before, maybe in the Big Bash and in some domestic stuff. I don't know if I've seen her play in such a dominating way in T20 cricket before, because it was still elegant. They were still proper shots, but there was so much power to it. I mean, so Catherine Brunt comes on, who's been taking a wicket in her first over basically throughout the tournament, and she goes for a couple of boundaries down the ground. Izzy Wong comes on, bounces Mandhana, who just plays an immaculate hook shot for 6. Flat hook shot for 6. Then she pumps Nat Sever over mid-wicket for 6. She comes down the pitch to Sarah Glenn, hits the leg spinner down the ground for 6. And the boundaries she's hitting, she's just like, I'm going to immaculately lace that through cover into the gap. Or that one's between extra cover and mid-off. Or that one's through point. Like, it was ridiculous how effective it was while still being completely controlled, cultured batting.
Yeah, I think there was a period in Mandhana's career, I'm going to stick my neck out and say it was 2018, I think it was, where she just dominated, and she may have even been ICC Player of the Year, ODI Player of the Year possibly as well, and she scored hundreds of fun. She just went through a stage. And she still translated that form from the ODIs into the T20s as well. But I think it's been a little while since we've seen her like this.
Yep.
And I think she's definitely worked a little bit on the power game as well.
Yep.
So she's kind of added that extra little bow to her arrow, or whatever you want to call it, if that even made sense. I don't know.
An extra bow to your arrow.
That's not what I mean. You know what I mean.
You've got a real supply problem if you've got one arrow and multiple bows. You're like, I could shoot this at you in a whole lot of different ways. But, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know,
okay.
what is it supposed to be? Arrow to your quiver, maybe?
What is it? What is it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
String to your bow.
Something like
There
that.
you go.
Yeah, there's
Why do you need more than one string to your bow? Just use the string
I
you've
don't
got.
know. The competition's made me a little bit crazy, I
Yeah.
think. But I only because it was actually so good today. It was really good. We had 2 brilliant games. But she's just kind of added this thing to her game, which when we see her in a T20 now, we talk so much about the power of Verma. But you've got Mandhana, the left-hander, with her on the other side, just as good. And maybe a more complete player than Shefali Verma. So India can't ask for much more from the power play.
So she already had the 2 fastest 50s by an Indian player in women's T20s, Mandhana. Then she broke her own record. So now she's got the 3 fastest, gold, silver, bronze, on the fast 50 podium. What I liked about this game was that it went one way and then the other so many times. So they hit, after 7 overs, India have got 73. They're going at 10 and over and they haven't lost a wicket, right? And then Shefali Verma gets out because, she kind of does sometimes, slogs one up in the air. And then the next over, Mandhana tries to scoop one over fine leg. She's just done that for 4. Tries again, it's a slower ball, doesn't have the pace on it, she gets caught. Then the scoring really slows down for 3 or 4 overs. And you go, okay, well, so from looking like they're going to make 180, they now look like they're going to make 130. And then Jemima Rodriguez starts to hit her straps. Harmanpreet hits a 6. You're like, oh, they're up again, they're flying. Harmanpreet's out next ball. You're like, all right, they're not. They're going back down again. Rodriguez gets going at that point, and it came and went so many times. And even when India got to 164, they got there. So Pooja Vastraka came out and didn't even face a ball. Came out and was out there for about 2 deliveries at the non-strikers end, did some running and got run out trying to get Rodriguez back on strike. So their best smasher of a ball, their biggest sort of baseball hitting power player kind of type, didn't even get to clean one out over the ropes. So it's felt at the halfway mark like India have left something out there. They probably should be 20, 25 runs more than they ended up given the start they had, and then they start with 5 no balls, the full toss. And this is Renuka Singh Thakur, who's been bowling gorgeously throughout the whole tournament. Just bowls a full toss, driven down the ground for 4, no ball. Then she goes for 4 next ball, so she's conceded 9 from the first ball of the match, technically. Yeah. And then England are going at 10 and over. They've got 42 off the first 4, and then they collapse, and then Siva and Jones build back, and you're like, they're definitely going to win it now. They needed 33 from the last 4 overs with those 2 at the crease. You're like, it's a doddle. They should walk in the park for that. Yeah. And then it tightens up again. I reckon about 6 times throughout the match it went, this team is definitely going to win. No, they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the beauty of the game, is that sort of ebb and flow. I think going into the final, India may have to just look a little bit at their tactics with the bat, in the sense Jemima Rodriguez was excellent, and if it wasn't for her innings, they definitely wouldn't have had enough, but there was no firepower from the other end which they required. I think maybe... And this is not to say that Dipti Sharma can't do the job. I probably would have brought in Pooja Vastraka ahead of her. I was a bit surprised that they didn't do that and give her a few overs, because if it doesn't work, you've got Dipti then coming in after that.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it kind of will work, because if you look at the scorecard, you take Jemima Rodriguez's innings out of it, then you've only got Mandhana's innings. Nobody else really contributes, and that's nowhere near enough. So I think they just got to have a little look at that ahead of the final. From England's point of view, they're going to, and they've got a lot of youngsters in the side. This is not the finished outfit for me in this England side, but I think they've got the potential to be a very, very good side and actually dominate T20 international cricket. But they're not the finished outfit just yet. And when they look back on this, they're going to look at the run-outs and go, too many run-outs. Alice Capsey. It's hard to criticise a 17-year-old who's only turning 18 on the 11th of August.
And not for their parents. It's easy.
But what she's done already in her short career is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. But it's hard to criticise her, but she did make an error today in that run-out, where there was a moment early on in the match where the ball had gone to I think it had gone to final third, and
Yeah.
she had run the single, and she was never looking for the second. There was a misfield. Her partner wanted the second run, and she had missed the opportunity. From then on, she was always looking for the second, and she always wanted to turn everything into two. So she wanted to fix that mistake.
Right.
But with the run out, she just turned and she just ran.
Well,
And she thought the ball was still with the fielder.
Yeah.
She didn't realise that it was already in the keeper's hand.
So this is like Danny White gets a top edge over to backward point. It plops down there, and it's being thrown back to the keeper as Capsey's starting to run. And she's just kind of halfway down and then goes, oh, what? You're not coming. Turns around, goes back and dives in, and she's got her bat upside down. And so the curve at the back of the bat lifts it up. So she's over the line but not touching the ground. And then she gets given out on the video replay, and she's astonished. She's like, I was definitely back in. She's getting mad. Danny Wyatt's arguing with the umpires, and you're like, it's clear as day on the screen when you're not looking at it from the middle of the pitch. That
even the Indian fielders actually had gone back to their mark.
Yeah.
They didn't realise she was out. They
Yeah.
actually thought that she was in because they saw the bat over the line, but not in the air. They didn't realise it.
Yeah, exactly. And these should probably be Hall of Fames, really, these dismissals. but the Capsey one, and then Danny Wyatt jumps across outside her off stump, tries to play a scoop, misses it completely. It hits the pad and ricochets into the stumps. That's not a good way to go.
No.
You don't want to get out in any way, but that one was that was on Comedy Street.
Yeah, it was. It was clever bowling because she had just played that lap over her shoulder, and it worked really well. Now, England batters are really good at that. So they had that fine leg up, and Danny Wyatt was like, well, I'm going to hit it there then. If you're not going to have a fielder there, I'm going to hit it there. She was very, very clever with it. But bowling next ball was actually really smart because she just made it just that little bit wider. And Danny Wyatt had shape to play the shots, and she probably should have bailed out of the shot and realised, okay, this is too wide for the shot, but she just kept going. And afterwards you could... I'm guessing, obviously, I don't know what she was thinking, but that thought process seemed to be going through her head, thinking, oh, maybe I should have just bailed out of that and not gone through with the shot. Nothing wrong with changing your mind.
Imagine jumping 2 feet outside your off stump and then just playing a forward defence. That's what she would have had to do.
Well, she could have just opened the face and played it to third, which she does well anyway, and she actually did very well today. It was great to see.
Yeah, and she was threading them through point and so on, those drives she was playing. And we talked about India's best bowler of the comp so far, just losing it completely, couldn't land it on the pitch, getting drilled away. It was bewildering, I suppose. But so they're 42 off 4 overs. Dunkley's whacked 19 quickly and got out LBW to a spinner.
Again.
Unsurprisingly. Perhaps it's a bit of a trend by now. Wyatt's kept going, and then Capsey's out. Wyatt's out, and it's like, oh, okay, shit, they got to rebuild. So Siver's batting with Amy Jones, and they bat for quite a long time, like 10 overs, thereabouts. But and they have like a couple of good overs, but India keeps slowing them down at key points. Shafali Verma comes on and bowls a quiet over. The spin's working. Deepti Sharma's bowling really well. Sneh Rana sort of comes into it later on, but she's vital at the end. And then they've got this 1 over. What is it? The 16th.
Shafali Verma bowled?
Yeah, there's 5 overs to go, and Shafali Verma gets brought back for a second over. And I remember thinking at the time, you're pushing your luck, Harmanpreet.
Yeah.
And she was. And she bowls a bad one. Amy Jones is pulling out the reverse pull shots and all the rest of it. Slow spin, sitting up, punts it away. They get 15 off the over, and it's like, all right, 33 off 24 balls. That's a stroll.
Yeah.
And then that's when it's Deepti again. That's when it's Sneh Rana again, conceding 3 off an over, I think 5 off the next over. And the required rate keeps going up, and it starts to get like it starts to look pretty tricky at this point. So they end up, needing 30 off the last 3 or whatever it was at that
something
point.
Something like that, yeah.
And that's when it starts to get tense, and then Amy Jones tries to run through for a single. It's not quite there, gets run out. Siver in the second last over pumps a big 6 over mid-wicket. You're like, all right, they're back in it. Then she tries to take a 2 and gets run out. So the run out after run out after run out, and that leaves them needing, 15 off 7 balls or whatever it was. I thought they didn't send out Sophie Eccleston early enough, because if you've got one player who can hit a 6 pretty early in their innings in your lineup, it's her. They sent out Maya Bouchier and then Catherine Brunt ahead of her. Both good players with the bat, but at that point, you just needed someone to hit a six. Like, that would have changed the whole equation because the runs required was so much higher than the balls remaining.
Yeah, and the irony is that Sophie Eccleston hit a six with the last ball as well. So
off the second ball she faced.
Yeah, and she does have that ability. She's worked actually on that. She never used to necessarily, and she's actually worked really hard at it. And we've seen over the last couple of years how she can do that. Mm-hmm. I think India were really clever. You mentioned they slowed it down in terms of the runs. They also slowed it down in terms of the time in between deliveries. They actually slowed it down so much they were behind on the over rate.
Oh, God. And I mean, like that should be Hall of Fame as well.
I think that was very clever because it's frustrating as a batting side to have to sit and wait and wait and wait. And you think, all right, when are you going to get on with it? And that's just the thing also about the women's game is, for a lot of these players, having played it for so long, they're so used to it moving so quickly and bowlers getting back to their mark so quickly and there not being that much time in between. So I thought it was very smart by India, as much as they ended up actually being penalised having to have a fielder inside because they were too slow, which we've seen now a couple of times in the tournament. I thought it was really clever. Very clever tactics.
Well, it worked either way. And like you say, Eccleston 6 off the last ball means that the margin's 4 runs. It wasn't quite that close.
No.
They needed 10 off the last 2 and were unlikely to get them. Or 11 off the last 2, whatever it was. It was a close one. It was a good one. It swung back and forth. India, Australia in the gold medal match, like that should be tasty if India can bring that sort of A game. That's what we're waiting for. But then Australia playing New Zealand. I mean, given New Zealand were so poor against England, like they were abject. It was horrific. It's not sugar-coated. It's one of the worst New Zealand performances I've ever seen. To make 71 in a 20-over match. And you're a proper team of proper players. It's not like it's not like Mali clubbing together to play the first cricket match in the history of the country. So, given how just drudgerous and awful that was, no wonder Australia sent them in. They're like, all right, go and have a bat then, see how you can do. And they actually did pretty well. I mean, Susie Bates gets bowled first ball. Megan Shute just goes straight through it. And like, Susie Bates must have faced thousands of deliveries from Megan Shute in the nets at the Adelaide Strikers and all the rest of it. And she was like, oh, an in-swinger. Oops, wasn't expecting that. Hit my stumps. Oh. So she's out. And that always means for New Zealand, if Sophie Devine doesn't make a big score, they're screwed. And Devine makes 53, goes along pretty slowly at first, starts quickening it up later, goes 4-6 off Jonathan, tries to repeat the dose, gets caught off the top edge, but had a big partnership with Amelia Kerr and gave them enough to set up a total anyway. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, to recover, when you take that into context, when you take the 71 for 9 into it, you think, all right, actually, this is quite a recovery. It still wasn't enough in a semi-final against Australia, and the scorecard obviously shows that. But when you see how they've put their innings together, there's a lot of runs that they left out there that they should have been able to find more runs. I was really impressed with Georgia Plummer. Where's she been? I mean, why hasn't she been playing in the tournaments? I'm really surprised. I mean, she's 18 years old. You look at her domestic record, it's not overly impressive. She strikes at just over 100. She's not somebody who is just banged the door down to get into the side. But it's the way she approaches the innings. At number 3, you want someone who's going to go over the top and be fearless like that and come down the track to Darcy Brown, who bowls at a decent pace.
Yeah. More to the point, she looked like a cricketer. Like, she played lofted off drives, she played late cuts, she played proper shots.
Power play use, and they haven't been able to really use that power play because Amelia Kerr hasn't quite been in the form that they've wanted. Right. And even Susie Bates, who made that fantastic 91 against South Africa, wasn't making the runs in the power play. She made the runs towards the back.
Yeah.
So, for me, really impressed with Plummer. Good fielder too.
I think she was the only player in the 50-over World Cup in any of the squads who didn't play a game.
Yeah, she didn't
sat there on the bench for the entire time, so could have done worse.
Well, actually, she wouldn't have been the only one. I can tell you Nonkululeko Mlaba didn't play it.
Okay.
For South Africa.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
and Sonola Jafta as well. So sorry.
I stole that stat from someone else. So I take no responsibility for it whatsoever. I'm like Alex Jones at his trial. I believe that to be true, and the judge says it doesn't matter what you believe to be true. It's not true. This is the point of testifying under oath. Is that the thing that is not true is not true.
Sorry, Geoff.
Nonetheless, it's an interesting day when we can get InfoWars into the final word. So, right, Australia did it. They made it look harder than it was towards the end. New Zealand sort of managed to tighten things up. There were dot balls, but really because Australia knew that they had enough overs to play with, that they were able to be a little bit more cautious. It was Healy getting out early again, caught down the leg side. Lanning gets dropped in the gully first ball. I mean, she was caught in the gully a couple of games ago as well. So that one's interesting. Then she pumps a 6 and then she gets out just after that. So strange sort of innings, made 7, 6 of them in one hit. And then it was Mooney and McGrath again. I mean, this is becoming a real repeat act for Australia. And they didn't go on and bat through the entire innings, but they did enough of it that they basically got the job sufficiently done that the rest could knock it off.
I reckon Beth Mooney may be one of the most underrated
Yep.
batters in the world, whether you can even just classify that as opening batters in the
Cricketers.
world. She is just phenomenal. The way she goes about her innings, I love watching her because it's simple. She doesn't try anything too fancy.
Yep.
And she's really good at manipulating bowlers. Like, as a bowler, I'm sure they must feel, where do I bowl to her? Because wherever I do, she somehow finds a way to score.
Yep.
And we always talk about Healy, Lanning, and obviously when Perry was at her full fitness, we speak about those 3 players, how devastating they are, how
Yep.
good they are in the side. But I feel like she doesn't get enough credit. I think Beth Mooney is absolutely phenomenal. And obviously having a left-hander at the top does help a lot. But she was so calm today. And even though she'll probably be frustrated that she didn't see it to the end, I thought she was absolutely brilliant. And again, that middle period from New Zealand, when they were batting, they didn't get enough. And when they were bowling, they gave away too much. For me, the tactics I found a little bit puzzling. They needed wickets. They gave too many gaps on the leg side.
Yep.
All Australia had to do was keep it along the grass and score singles. They only needed 7 and over. They didn't have to go for boundaries. You've got to cut those singles off. So I just feel like that middle period is something New Zealand need to work on. And obviously, take your chances. Does
Take
help.
your chances. Take your chances. Yeah, they dropped a lot. They dropped McGrath mid-off. Hannah Rowe put her down. Pretty straightforward chance. And that ended up being the key one, I think. And she was belting the ball so powerfully. I think it's time for the Hall of Fame.
Okay, here we go.
The Final Word Hall of Fame is the moment of the day when we pick what we thought was the most final word thing we saw. What matched the vibe. It's brought to you by advancedhairstudio.com/final word. That's the website you go to for 15% off if you want to get your renovations done up top. They've got a whole range of ways they can do it, a whole lot of magic they can do. I think there's a 100% satisfaction guarantee as well. Just saying, just floating that out there. Now, let's say I spoke about Talia McGrath belting the crap out of the ball. I'm going to Hall of Fame nomination for it's Susie Bates as a kind of, it's like a Martin Scorsese getting the Oscar as a kind of lifetime award. You know, it's a body of work award. So she was out there and she bumped into Megan Shute at the start when Megan Shute was just about to start bowling, and then did this like pretend aggro thing because they've been teammates at the Adelaide Strikers for so long, and then they were both just cacking themselves laughing, and I was like, that's funny. Then Talia McGrath belts a ball at Susie Bates at cover, who grabs it and it knocks her over backwards, and she's just lying on her back giggling. I'm like, you're having the time of your life out there. I love that. I respect that. And then she took an amazing catch as well, running in off the boundary, diving forward late in the piece, just to give them a sniff. You know, they didn't end up getting the win, but it was a catch off Haynes, wasn't it? Yeah. Rachel Haynes, who'd made 19 and was helping tick the score over. And then she was out, and there was just a window where it was like, all right, if you could get Grace Harris, you could maybe turn this around. They didn't, but she gave them that opening.
Well, Susie Bates, how good is she under those high catches? She is absolutely phenomenal. And when it goes up and it's her underneath it, you pretty much, all right, well, this is out. It's fine. She took a record number of catches last season as well. So for her to be at this age moving as well as she does, she makes it look easy. And she got to that catch beautifully. But I love her approach to the game. As you said, just looks like she's having the time of her life.
Any Hall of Fames for you?
Catherine Brunt.
Yeah.
Catherine Brunt and her frustration, who, by the way, this is, as much as I do find it funny, this is not maybe a role model in the way to behave, because she has been cited for it.
ICC
just by the way.
have pinged her for a point, a disciplinary point.
Yes, for offensive language.
Yep.
But the part that really made me laugh was when she ran in and the batter stopped because there was movement in the field, which was on the boundary and really wasn't affecting play. And Catherine Brunt stopped and put her arms out and was like, I'm ready. You need to be ready. Why aren't you ready? And then she had to obviously go back to the top of the mark. She wasn't happy. And we saw that at the World Cup, actually, where she had to start her run up again.
Yep.
She wasn't happy. She wasn't happy.
My last nomination is, so you mentioned being behind the over 8 and having to bring up a fielder. You're only allowed 3 outside the circle if you're behind the over 8. So that happened to India, and they managed to defend the runs that they needed to defend. New Zealand, second last over, they pop up on the scoreboard. New Zealand's behind the over rate, right? And so they're going to, when they get into the last over, have to lose a fielder. But at this point, Australia need about 3 to win. So Sophie Devine goes, oh, well, and just brings them all up anyway. It's like, well, if we're going to have to bring them up, we'll bring them up. So before she had 2 out, I think, and everybody else up inside the ring, and 3 dot balls, and then a couple of dot balls to start the next over, and you're like, well, hang on. Australia only need 1 to tie the game, but they're not getting them because there was somebody everywhere. She choked the field. And so I thought, in some ways, you can use it to your tactical advantage if you're forced to. It may not always be a disadvantage.
No, it may not always be a disadvantage. And actually, it's a lesson maybe going forward, is captains at the end, sometimes it's okay to bring the fielders in. If you bring them close enough, you're forcing batters to go over the top, and sometimes it doesn't work. So who knows? Sometimes it may work.
Well, it's been the Final Word Daily from the Commonwealth Games, the second last Commonwealth Games daily. We'll be back with the medal matches. England playing New Zealand for bronze, Australia and India playing off for gold and silver tomorrow. Patreon.com/thefinalword is where you can support the show, and you can find me and Nat back with you for the last episode very soon.